So the worst thing to happen over the past year since the beginning of 2020 was the COVID pandemic. It costed 4 million lives, and around nearly 200 million people have had COVID-19 or the various variants that have came around. But today we're analyzing which countries have had the most deaths per capita. Yeah. And no, America is not in the top 10. And there are some very surprising inclusions on this list. You expect some countries of older populations like Japan and Italy to appear on this list, but apparently they're not on this list. And no, we're not be including Gibraltar, if this list was including countries that are not sovereign nations, Gibraltar would be number 5 on the list. Well, and if we exclude countries less than a million people, then Argentina and Slovakia would be on this list, as Montenegro and San Marino have less than a million people. Well, now we start the list. And also, my condolences to everybody who has died, everybody's families who have died, who have experienced a death from the evil COVID-19 virus. So yep, this video could be demonetized, but again, this is an extra video to inform people of who haven't caught up with the pandemic in recent times. And no, again, America is not on this list. Number 10, Colombia. Colombia is actually the youngest country on the list. Colombia is number 10 on this list with 2,316 deaths per capita. Colombia is a country you would not expect on this list. But according to the World Monitor's most recent data, Colombia is the number 10th most infected country, or number 11 if you include Gibraltar. Colombia has always had problems. Since they have been a country, Colombia has always had political problems and instability, basically. But and yeah, Colombia has basically been a more of an unstable country. But despite this, you would think that Colombia would have less deaths because it has a lower average age. But Latin America has been one of the worst affected continents, especially South America, in the world. It will not be the last South American country on this list. There are actually 2 regions of the world that are very worst infected by this list. But yeah, Colombia, again, they actually have said that Latin Americans are much more worse infected, do much worse with COVID-19 than any other group of people. Which makes sense why Colombia is so high on this list. Number 9, Brazil. Everybody saw Brazil coming. Brazil has always been touted as one of the worst infected countries on this list in the world. Brazil is number 9 on this list. It has a COVID death toll per capita of 2,571. The grim fate of Brazil is due to the leaders' handling of the pandemic. Basically, Brazil is, of course, one of the worst infected countries in the world. Some places the more older southern part has more deaths per capita than the more younger northern part. But it still stands that Brazil is one of the worst infected countries in the world. It's also very sad to see Latin America on this list because Brazil has a much younger population than most of the countries on this list, like most of South America. But Latin America is one of the worst infected continents in the world, which is no surprise at all. Brazil also is also very quickly catching up to America as well in terms of deaths total as well, despite having only 200 million people. Brazil is also the largest country on the list, the only country of over 100 million people to make this list. Number 8, the first European country makes the list, Montenegro. The Balkans is going to be a mainstay for this entire series. This entire video. Montenegro has a very old population. If you look at the average age per country, Montenegro is pretty old, like the rest of Europe. A lot of people are old in Europe. And the Balkans is one of the most vulnerable regions. And I was actually predicting that the Balkans would be one of the worst infected in deaths. Montenegro is known as just like most of the Balkans. It has a very old population, which older populations are susceptible to diseases like COVID-19. Montenegro is at 2,590 deaths per capita. Number 7, North Macedonia. Another country that is not surprisingly on the list is North Macedonia, another country with a very old population. North Macedonia's population has been declining for decades because people don't want to have kids. Same thing in Montenegro. North Macedonia is one of the worst infected places in the world in terms of deaths. It is not really high in terms of cases per person than as other countries like Argentina and Colombia and Brazil, and other parts of Europe and lesser populated countries. But North Macedonia still had the grim record of 2,646. Again, this is mostly because North Macedonia has a very old population. Number 6, Bulgaria. Bulgaria, again, is another country no surprise on this list. The Balkans is one of the worst countries for deaths. Despite, for example, Bulgaria has the same amount of deaths as Bangladesh, despite Bangladesh having 160 million people. Bulgaria, again, has a very old population, and its population has been declining for decades, as well because Bulgaria's population is very old, perhaps one of the oldest in the world. And yep, Bulgaria is at a deaths per capita 2,640. Number 5, San Marino. San Marino is a microstate in the middle of Italy. So of course, it's a microstate, so its deaths per capita is very high. San Marino is the smallest country on this list, and has a population of only 34,000, compared to Bulgaria's 6.8 million people and North Macedonia's 2 million people, and Montenegro's 268,000 people. San Marino is basically surrounded by Italy, and has 2,641 deaths per capita. But again, nobody really lives in San Marino, and also San Marino has a very old population. Number 4, Czechia. Czechia is the only country not to be in the Balkans. Eastern Europe is just very old and people don't want to have kids there, keeping the population very old. It's actually it's the only European country on the list besides Hungary to not be a part of the Balkans. Czechia has a death per capita rate of 2,829. It's actually the third most populated country, one of the most populated European country on the list, having 10.7 billion people. And again, Czechia has a much older population, which is not too surprising. Number 3, Bosnia. Bosnia is another country, no surprisingly, is on this list. Bosnia has one of the oldest populations in the world. And again, it's in the Balkans, which also has an extremely old population. Bosnia and Herzegovina is the third most grim, nearing 3,000 deaths per capita. It has a death toll of 2,269 per capita. Again, it is because of Bosnia and Herzegovina's very old population. Number 2, Hungary. Hungary is another country in Europe. It's actually the last country in Europe, which is very surprising on this list. You would think number 1 would be Monaco or Switzerland or Moldova, which also have very old populations as well. But despite this, Hungary has a high deaths per person of 3,116, mostly because of the older population, and also Hungary has a higher obesity rate in Europe than other countries. So yep, it's number 2 on the list. And number 1, Peru. Yep, what, Peru? Of all countries? Yep, Peru is officially the worst infected country by death toll. Peru has a staggering death toll of 5,857 after the government admitted they undercounted deaths in the nation. making Peru the worst death toll in the world by far. Maybe it's like one county in America that has a higher death toll per capita. But other than that, Peru is the worst infected country in the world. I kind of feel sorry for the people of Peru that they had to go through this. They're always making they're also the first country to hit, besides of course San Marino, to hit 1,000 deaths per capita. And now to have 5,000 after the government revised it. And even then before, they're already in the top 10 before. So yep, there we go about Peru. Peru is the worst infected country death toll wise. And yep, there we go. And that's basically about this video. Goodbye.